Are you concerned about all this corruption being misgendered as conspiracies? Well, don't you worry. Sit back, relax, and join in the conversation as we talk with today's guest. Welcome to another LSB Film Productions podcast with your host, Chris Brooks.
Hello and welcome to the channel. It's me, Chris Brooks, for another LSB Film podcast. Today I'm joined with Trevor Mealham, and Trevor has made it his mission in fighting the UK state crimes against humanity, from exposing corruption by the police, MPs, judges and banks such as the mortgage fraud. The list is pretty much endless where the corruption is. So let's hear what Trevor has to say. Very excited to hear this. Welcome to the show, Trevor.
Hey, Chris.
So, how did this all start for you? What was the pivotal point of you going down this road?
So my background is in property.
Mm-hmm.
I got into estate agency in 1986, 87. Had my own two estate agents for a good few years. I chaired a group of about 20 offices called Linear, local independent network of estate agents. I had two of the offices. There were other independents in that group, and we worked together. We collaborate, and we found we could do better for the vendors, and we could do better as a business. You know, it was good, genuine, old-fashioned estate agency, the way it was done over 100 years ago, far superior to the crap that's done now. So I did that. Over the years, I then got brought out on both offices. I'd also bought a few properties, and I then invested what I'd earned in these properties into a new platform, which was to take the property sharing, the brokerage, to a bigger audience. And we thought, rather than just do it here in Kent, we had 20 odd offices. Let's spread it further. And we set up a national network called INEA, the Independent Network of Estate Agents, and we grew to 650 estate agents on board. We ploughed a good over £1 million into it, and it's similar but different to the American MLS, where the agents, real estate agents, co-broker, and it had to be different because the data structure and the everything is different. So I did that. That then involved me getting invited to government meetings through a good friend, Chris Hall, who was the ex-president of the National Association of Estate Agents. And I think Chris was struggling with IT and tech a little bit. My background is property, but building INEA, I got to know a little bit about databases and relational databases and what they can do. Can't program, and so on. So with that, I found that over the years, I had roughly 10 years where every other month, I would be invited up to Portcullis House or HMRC, Treasury, big building where they filmed Spectre, James Bond, that sort of thing. I'd be invited to BIS, Business Innovation Skills. And you be there with, say, 4 or 5 other people that could be under Treasury, Serious Fraud Office. And it could be about money laundering, Russian money laundering. It could be all sorts of things. It could be about consumer protection regulation. So I was then invited to have these consultation papers on property fraud, money laundering, that sort of thing. And that's how I really got into that. So I got a grasp of how government works with legislation, the bills, regulation, risk, compliance, and how it should filter down and how to deal with things on a risk-based approach. So that was that. We'd often have information that we couldn't put out in public, but equally the government would use my resources to get feedback from the property industry. We had a mailing list of 23,000 estate agents, and it was a good place for raw research. So that's really where I learned about property legislation, regulation, but mainly in residential sales. So I'm not an expert on lettings or that sort of thing. And I had adoptions as well, which then the 23,000 estate agent offices, some of those adoptions were suggestions from me and others like trading standards officers and so on.
Was that a big
So
eye opener for you?
I think I did it. I mean, I never got paid for it other than the odd sandwich and the odd tea and coffee and that sort of thing. But I didn't do it for that. I hate it. I hate consumers being conned.
Mm.
And it was the opportunity, one, that we could make sure our business as it grew stayed on the right tracks, but it also meant that if we had an estate agent or consumer issue, then I was perhaps a little bit more educated to look into it. So, yeah, it was a bit of an eye opener, but I think now I look at it, what a disappointment.
Mm.
You know, you do it for the right reasons, and then you find you've got all these crooks and useful idiots running the system.
Yeah. Yeah, that does seem to be the way of the world, doesn't it, at the moment, which is a great shame because, oh, yeah, corruption. Who needs it? So,
Crooks.
what are the things that you, so, yeah, crooks. So, what is it that you've been doing then? Because as I understand it from Nilu, shout out to Nilu, you've been helping people with like mortgage fraud and stuff. Is that correct?
So there's a lot of people that say all mortgages are fraud and all this and that, and I don't quite go along that route.
Okay.
Um, you know, there might be fraud within it. Just close that notification. There might be fraud within it, but my main sector is SMEs, business owners that have been come under bait and switch. So people like Lloyds Bank,
Hmm.
Crooks, RBS, where the business manager has said, look, we think you're ripe for expansion, that sort of thing, or we can offer you better rates if you move bank. We'll offer you this deal. So people go in, they're baited, and you get part way along. You might be a third of the way along, or 50%, or two-thirds, and then the bank pulls the rug on you. It's called bait and switch. If you imagine walking up the high street on a Sunday and there's a lock-up shop and there's somebody selling TVs that are a brilliant brand in the box and they show you one, great, and you get home and it's nothing like that, you know. So that's bait and switch, but it also happens in
Right. Okay.
this. It comes under Consumer Protection from Unfair Trading Regulations 2008, and it's prosecuted under typically the 2006 Fraud Act. But it's not, because what's happening when you report fraud in the UK, the police will send you to leaflet number 9 or whatever it is on the wall, which should be actionless fraud. So when you phone up the Quango in Glasgow, which is a call centre,
Hmm.
the Times did a good article on it a few years back where people were asleep there and had absolutely no idea. And they were run under a thing called the Home Office counting rules, which is from the Home Office, and it's inadequate. So when you report fraud, they say, well, we can't see anything. And that's because they allow you 2,500 characters and no prima facie evidence. So they say we can't see anything and nothing will get done other than the person will remain suffering. So the action fraud is covered by City of London Police. So if you take the Corporation of London, the City of London, Square Mile, it's
Hmm.
run by the lawyers, the judiciary, the bankers, the auditors. So all these crooks that are doing fraud upon people,
The bar guild.
you're then reporting them. And if you eventually get there, it goes back to the people that you've reported. And then what will happen? Typically, financially, you'll run into trouble. it's like um, it's like a bank saying it's like someone saying we give you the money to put fuel and water in to go across the desert into your vehicle, and you get halfway across and it runs out, and they say, well, no, we're going to change the rules now, so you can't move forward, can't move back. You know, one thing's going to happen. So basically, the Corporation of London oversees the police. People are then dragged into civil court, whereas it should be criminal court,
Hmm.
because a lot of what's happening, it should come under the 2006 Fraud Act or the 68 Theft Act if you go back before 2006. You've also got secret commissions. So we took loads of evidence to Avon Somerset Police, and they covered it up. And we had meetings with them. They didn't also know what the Ivy test was, which is the test for deceit, which is a bit embarrassing for them when they've got the assistant chief constable sitting there, and we're sitting there being told, "Oh, there's no fraud on these cases." And when you ask them, um, "Did you go to the CPS?" I mean, the trouble they had with me, I got briefed by our police lawyer, so
Mhm.
I went in knowing what to
Exactly.
ask,
Yeah.
and they couldn't answer it.
It does
They're
seem that
idiots.
Somerset police are a bit of a problematic police force because as we speak now,
Well, they're criminal.
I'm airing the voice interview cassette from Somerset Police with Len Lawrence, the ex
Yep.
pilot, and yeah, he says the same that they're just so corrupt. They're so. I think Masonic comes
I
into it as
think
well,
it.
but
Yeah. I mean, you've got there's definitely people involved with Masons that are a problem, but then I dare say there's probably good people.
yeah.
It's like anything, isn't it?
Mm.
You know, I know a lot of these people turn religious later on in life, so whether they get a conscience or whatever. But I mean, my view is the Bible is probably the biggest false instrument that's ever taken in a courtroom. Um,
Yeah, see, I've got a different take on the Bible, and I have mentioned this on my podcast before, but I look at the Bible as a book about you and your body, and that's it.
right.
Now, if you go down like the art of sacred secretion, it's all internal. So, just to give you a quick, because it's not really what we're talking about, but Jesus died at the age of 33 in Calvary. Calvary is Latin for skull. You've got 33 vertebrae. And it's all about the oil that comes from your brain that travels down your body in like moon cycles
Well,
and then goes
so
back
to
up.
so so to
No,
butt in
go on.
there, but 33 is a very good Masonic number.
Yes, it is also the high
And
degree.
the leak report that I got through from Thames Valley Police had 33 pages in it. So
Really?
whether that's coincidence or what, I don't know.
I
But
tell you
yeah,
what,
we
I see 33 all the time. The numbers that I used to see all the time were 66, but now it seems to be 33. So we've literally gone half. But I don't know what it necessarily means. But
might mean nothing at it, but I mean, we the main bits we do, we do on either joining facts together or factual things or whatever. But no, I think the Bible. I mean, doing what I do now, I meet a lot of people that perhaps I wouldn't have met, and there was some chaps that were going to court, and I went along to support the court cases and so on. And one of them said to the judge, he said, "On what authority are you here?"
mm,
And this, you can guess where it's going. You're not the highest authority, and so, like I say, I'm totally not religious. Um, and so on. I'm what they call a INTJ, so we work more on we're more back end strategists, that sort of thing. But um, I think if you look back at the Bible, it got me looking at it because I am not religious, but it got me looking at it. And if you take it, the originally there wasn't a singular God. Apparently, there were
no,
multiple gods,
made in our
and
image.
well, and then you've got to go back to the Hebrew and the Greek papers.
Mm,
And many of the books from the old chapters, if you like, or Bibles or whatever, and not like the Book of Giants and that sort of thing. They're not in it, and so on. But if you look back, I think we're still paying for Henry VIII's divorce, where the Vatican wouldn't let him get divorced, so he took over and created the C of E. And if you take that at the time, if you converted a Bible from Latin, Greek, Hebrew to English, it was death sentence.
mm.
And there was somebody called Tyndall who created a converted Bible, who eventually got killed. But the the guy who oversaw for King Henry the rewriting of the Bible into English was Thomas Cromwell,
Mm.
and Thomas Cromwell was the king's lawyer. Why would you have a lawyer oversee the writing of the Bible. And it just gets me that when you get people getting repossessed, and then you think about the Bible, forgive those who trespass against, and what the king did, he took over a lot of the Catholic churches, monasteries, took the land and created feudal courts and lords of the manor under him. So I think I think there was probably a lot of what was in the original Bibles, but I think they slipped bits in as well.
Yeah, well, I think they've removed something like, what was it, 30 stories or something from the Bible. It's quite a lot, isn't it? And genuinely believe things like the Revelations and that. I wouldn't be at all surprised if the elites had just rewritten that, almost like a
Yeah,
plan, as right. So people who aren't quite so awake, maybe, are like, oh, look, the Bible is still coming true. Look, this is happening. And I think, well, yeah, because they've written that. So
yeah.
it's their plan.
But saying that, if someone is religious, then fair play to them. If it gets them through to tomorrow, then fair play. I mean, I had a victim a couple of weeks ago that had lost his family through fraud of Lloyds Bank, another farmer. And, 6, 7 years ago, he felt that he needed to get a can of petrol and a lighter. And fair play to the police on that. They talked him down, but they didn't go on and investigate the fraud that was the source of the problem.
Was this our dear friend Danny Beach?
No.
No, okay, because that was also very reminiscent of his story, where they basically come into his house and he had light and fuel. And he's like, back off, back off.
This is heated up. No, I'm aware of 81 people that have gone to take their lives through this crap, including kids. And,
It's horrific.
if I hear that some of these judges or senior police or lawyers or bankers end up topping themselves, I haven't got a problem with that because, like I say, it's good and bad in everything. My own case, I've been to court now 29 times. And the last time I was in court, the judge brought up a fact the judge brought up a point from the other side. And I said, well, I can rebut that, Your Honour, from my evidence that's e-filed. And he said, you haven't got evidence e-filed. All there is one statement. I said, no, that's not true. And he said, no, I haven't seen anything else. And he said, I could have you for being in contempt. And I said, well, the only one in contempt at the moment is you. And I said, now you're denying me my evidence. How can I have a fair trial if I don't have my evidence? And you've got to have due process. So one of the things you hear many of the groups say now is about liberty of the subject, 1354. And I'd like to take a bit of credit for that, about when they created it. But I put it to a lot of the people at these eviction blocks and so on, that if there's something in process, because it's about due process, and if that's not come to an end, then a home shouldn't be taken.
No.
No man, woman should have their home, their inheritance, whatever, taken without due process. And you've also got observance of due process, 1368. And if it's found that people have done wrongful things, then it makes the whole lot void. Fraud unravels all. But we have got a constitution, but our government doesn't seem to realise why it's there. No, I mean, we've got the Bill of Rights, 1688 or 1689. You see it with both. And from what I understand is that the Declaration of Rights was signed in The Hague, court at The Hague, and that was 1689. That was William and Mary.
Mm-hmm.
And then a year later, in 1688, yes, you did hear that right. They then came over, and it was the Bill of Rights. And the reason that the other one was 1689 was because the clocks went back. So not the clocks, the calendar went back.
This
So
is the Gregorian. We're in the Gregorian calendar now, aren't we?
yeah.
And
So
before that, it was what?
I don't know,
No.
but we've got the Bill of Rights, and in the first line of the Bill of Rights, it mentions liberty of the subject, and that's you You've got liberty of the subject, 1354. Um, you've also got the coronation oath, which the monarch, the monarch really is the top civil servant. And if you look at all these idiots that swear their oaths and the non-idiots, but a lot of them are idiots, you've got senior police swear their oath to be non-biased, uphold fundamental human rights, and so on. You've got judiciary, judges swear two oaths, etc., MPs. But why are they not upholding their oath to protect the people? You know,
Don't they swear an oath to the crown? And
well,
don't the police swear an oath at the time, like to the king or the queen, as opposed to the
well,
people?
they do, but they're also really swearing it to us, aren't they?
Mm.
Because if the king or queen has got a duty to protect the subjects, then if the police are swearing oath to up that to uphold rule of law and
Mm.
etc. etc. When I was in court, we had to call the police on the judge, so I did, and that it was High Court judge. When we established that he was denying me my evidence, and I said, "Are you on your oath?" And he took 20 seconds to think about it. And then he said, "I could have you in contempt." And I said, "Well, the only one in contempt is you." And then at that point, I called the court to a stop. I had about 30 people there. And I said, "Could somebody please phone the police?" And at this point, the judge went running out the room. And then Lloyds Bank, DLA Piper, their barrister, they all went running out the room. And then the guards of the court, about 10 of them, were all up in arms. "You've got to leave the court." And I said, "We're not going anywhere. This is now a crime scene. I've taken over." So the police then came along and I said, "Are you on your oath?" There was about 12 riot police there, quite decent guys. They confirmed they were on their oath. And I said, "Right, well, your oath is also to uphold fundamental human rights and be non-biased. The judges deny me my evidence, so I can't have a fair
Fair
trial,
hearing.
which is ECHR 6,
Hmm.
right to a fair trial." I said, "And it's also Magna Carta, right to a fair trial, 1215. So I then phoned Anthony Stansfield, and Anthony explained he was the ex-crime commissioner and so on. But the judge stayed in his room for an hour and a half. Big boy.
Mm.
you know, we caught him out. And then after that, he came out at the end of the day after the police had gone and the other little rats slipped back into or snakes slipped back into the court. And the judge said, "Well, I want everybody out now, apart from Mr. Mealham and the other side. So it's not going to happen." And he said, "Right, I will hold the next hearing on Monday." This was a Friday, remotely. So it was held from his study with no clerk, no usher, and me on silence for 95% of the time. So the guy he shouldn't be at home in his study. He should be in a cell somewhere.
I was going to say, see, the police came, but if real justice has been served, they would have dealt with him,
They'd
and
have dealt with him, yeah.
and he would have lost his right to judge. I would have thought.
Well, hopefully he would have lost his liberty and be banged up behind a
Yeah.
cell.
So, although the police are still decent, they're still really failing to do the job because they're all in cahoots, aren't they? And like you say, it's all down to like the middle London, the London Square, that they're all in the same club.
Well,
Yeah, they
yeah.
all work together. I mean, I
But
have to say, I envy anybody who gets so balls deep in this stuff as people like yourself, because I struggle to retain information, and the fact that you're so knowledgeable in what it is that you do, and the fact that how many times did you say you've been to court? 20 odd.
my case has been to court now about 29 times as a
So,
litigant in person. No, so I've not had lawyers.
for most people, that would break them. Just the thought of going to court once, most people are like, "Mm."
That's why I've got to do it then.
So hats off to you, I have to say, because I envy and admire anyone who can play that game.
Yeah, but it's a waste of time, Chris. You've got these little SH1Ts running these courts thinking they're all almighty and so on, you know. And like I say, I've had a few good judges, but mine was in the lower courts in Canterbury. We had some crook judges there. We had judges, well, when I asked them, said, "No, I'm not on my oath." And I said, "Well, how do I get a fair trial then?" I said, "That makes you a paid for solicitor for the other side in a private room."
Mm.
That shuts them down. But we had one good judge there, Judge Perry, and I sent him a bit loopy, I think. But I said to him about Plevin versus Paragon, and he said, "Oh, that was one of my friends that took that up from the county court upwards through the Queen's Bench and so on." And I said, "Well, that applies on mine." I said, "Banks have raised money via securitization." I said, "And we've not had it. We've only had a little bit of it, and they've kept the rest. And now they're trying to take our property that they've put a charge on,
Mm.
which is fraud, and it's bribery on the secret commission." So he actually supported me. And that's when we managed to get Professor Nigel Harper in, who was the ex HMRC banking inspectorate. And then we went to the Queen's Bench. And we were there, we kept going there. And then mum got cancer pretty bad. There was one time that I couldn't go because of that. And the rats, the other side, then got it manipulated to the Central London County Court, which again, it's a rat's nest. It's not justice. It's a
Mm.
it's a place for them to meet you and to discuss how they're going to rip you off and rape you, basically, bunch of crooks. But I did have. So we went up to the Queen's Bench. We did have a good judge in there. We had bad ones. Then it got put down to the Central London County Court, the Thomas More building. We know what happened to him. And then I've got evidence against people like Priti Patel, who knew about these frauds back in 2014. So I showed this to the judge, and under CPR, Civil Procedure Rules 30.3, subsection 3, if there's evidence that can come to light of national security, public interest, it has to go up to the High Court. So anyone who's facing court, if they don't know about it, there's a thing called CPR, Civil Procedure Rules. And you want to have a look at those. And you could even on AI now, you could say, "I'm in court." You could scan the paperwork into some of the AIs. You could get that to read it and say, what CPR do I need to do this and that, and get your N244 applications in. So we had Judge Jordan, good judge at the Central London County Court. They wanted to bring in that morning one of the crook judges, Judge Johns, again, who denied me loads of evidence and played judge for a week. And so anyway, we had Recorder Jordan, and I said, "Look, I've got this evidence here, Priti Patel. I've got a list of 70 potted summaries of people that have been badly affected." See, we haven't got just one crime. You've got three silos.
Mm.
Silo one on what I do. So I'm not saying this applies to every mortgage and so on, but on the SMEs where they're baited and then switched, you've got silo one. Now that is fraud, bribery, unfair terms in consumer contracts, using duress, they use perjury in court, etc. So that's silo one. And then you've got silo two. So when you go and see Constable Nick, who's a officer, and you go and see him, and he says, "Oh, I can't see any fraud," etc. Maybe he can't see it. I mean, Theresa May and Cameron did a lot of damage. They removed a lot of the good cops, and perhaps left us with some that don't understand it, but equally there's some that do understand it, and they're crooks.
Mm.
So if a police officer and if the regulators don't do as they should in public office, then you get a variance of misconduct in public office. So you get malfeasance, you get nonfeasance, and you get misfeasance. So if they pervert and they act willfully blind, if you take silo one and you take silo two, so the fraud, the bribery silo, and then the misconduct in public office, silo two, you get silo three. And what would you think silo three is?
Just to think.
Silo 3 is it's human rights abuse.
Hmm.
It's ECHR3, which is torture, it's psychological torture. So when you go to these regulators like FOSS and the FCA and the police and wherever else, and you're kept in this civil, and you're told, oh, it's civil. It's civil, go to court, go and give more money to the crooks that are screwing you. When I was in court and I said to Recorder Jordan, I said, we've got evidence on Priti Patel and so on. And I showed him the evidence. It was November 2014 in Hansard. Priti Patel is saying, as the Secretary to the Exchequer, she's saying about these frauds and the police failure, and she's talking about 45 cases and so on. She's doing the right thing, and she said this needs to go to the FCA, needs dealing with, and so on. So great. But then what happened was nothing. And then in 2019, well, 2018, I believe it was, we managed to get a independent external investigation into Avon Somerset Police. And it was carried out. Anthony Stansfield managed to get the funding. But what happened? They conned Anthony and they conned us because it turned into a peer review. So rather than police going with fresh eyes and an honest view, an experienced view, they went in to look at what Avon Somerset had done, which was a cover up. And they didn't extend the remit. So it's like having a murder weapon and saying you can look anywhere in the house, but you can't go in the airing cupboard, bottom right corner. You can go in all the bedrooms, the roof, the garden, the sheds. You can go in the neighbours, you can go in the whole town, the country, but you're not allowed in that bottom corner of the airing cupboard. And so what happened was there was then a big cover up of the cover up. And that's what happened. But the police officer that was sitting above it was Deputy Chief Constable Jason Hogg. He's recently got suspended and then reinstated for tampering with evidence. And the one below him was Nick Johns, who got promoted off to the Met Police. And what happened was we had this report come through, and it was 33 pages. And I thought, what do I do with this? It came in on a Wednesday. Tracy was doing the shopping. And I thought it was just some paperwork back. So I thought, I can't be bothered to stay with this rubbish. And I opened it the next day and I saw my background support document. I saw the DSAR documents. I saw the bits from Professor Harper, the bits from the forensic accountant. And there was a Thames Valley document. And I thought, well, that's not mine. I looked at it and there were 11 cases in it, including mine and 10 others. And I thought, well, this is their review. So I looked at it and it was the pre-final version. And I thought, you lousy, filthy whatnots. Because I knew a lot of the cases. And the Thames Valley Police had covered up. Well, what we now know from Anthony is that when Thames Valley looked into Lloyds H. Bosch Reading, they didn't complete it. They only did investigation stages 1 to 3. They didn't do 4 to 9. So if you go in the Project Law Turnbull report, the internal report by Sally Marston, you've got a big list of names in there. They've got nice lifestyles now. They should be banged up. So we had this report, and then I was asked by the police to send it back. I said, no, you're not having it. And I told Andy he could have it in a month's time. So I thought, what do I do with it now? And I had a box of other victims that had contacted me, and I'd write notes down and leave it in the box. What do you do with it? So we then had this report. I was watching YouTube on a Sunday morning, a few days later, and Tracy said, is it my turn to make the tea or yours? And I thought, well, that's a silly question. It's your turn. So she went off to make the tea. And as I was flicking through YouTube this Sunday morning, up it came America's Most Dangerous Man. I thought it's going to be an Al Capone thing. So I've been watching a lot of crime investigation and Al Capone. They didn't do them on a lot of the bits they did. They did them on tax evasion. But anyway, that's irrelevant. but it was about a guy called Daniel Ellsberg, and it was a trailer. And so I thought, right, well, don't know that name and so on. I looked at it, and then I watched the film. And Daniel Ellsberg, he was a top security civil servant in America, the Pentagon,
Hmm.
and he was involved in, without knowing it, covering up the Vietnam War and all this money and um, the, the the American people's kids going to war, the soldiers and all that sort of thing. And he went off to Vietnam and he thought these are not bad people. And then he thought, well, Nixon and that a pack of liars. They're lying to our own people. Our kids are getting killed. They're extorting our money, and we're being run by madman Nixon. So Daniel Ellsberg had a conscience, and he started taking home 20 pages, 30 pages, 10 pages. And before he knew it, he got these 7,000 pages and was Xeroxing them at home. He made, I think, 7 copies or something. And he hid them various places. And he then found this little politician, middle of nowhere, who would have like 2 people come along to the meetings. And he said, do you want some reading matter? So he got it in public record. And then Daniel Ellsberg leaked the Pentagon Papers. But he had a moral compass, and he put doing the right thing over cover up and a wage. And I think he could have gone to jail for 115 years. But when I saw this little clip, I thought, bingo, I've got a leaked report that shows the government, the state is covering up these frauds. We've got people getting hurt. I've got this evidence from all these other cases. I then got to know the chartered forensic accountant, and he got a load of cases. So we brought it all together and we called it, the name of the report, Op Meadow. And we built it to 96 cases. We then sent those cases to Priti Patel, and inside those cases, it included 13 cases, where 2 of those cases that mirrored the other 11, not our 11, but another lot. 3 law lords said it was bribery and fraud. So we handed documents over to Avon Somerset Police, the Home Secretary, that showed that they mirrored what these 2 other cases had been ruled on. And the police carried the cover-up going. Well, this affects me, it affects my family, it affects loads of the victims.
It does, yeah. Well, of course it does. Cool. It's incredible to think what goes on and how it goes on, and the fact that it's allowed to go on. So, are you quite optimistic that change is afoot with regards to the amount of corruption that's going on and what they're getting away with? And
I think the trouble is we haven't got an honest system. So the trouble is you'll get some people saying, you'll get you'll get some people saying, "Oh, mortgages are fraud, ba-bum, ba-bum, ba-bum." And I don't fully agree with that philosophy. If you
are they basing that on that you're actually the creditor and you sign it? You're the one creating the money, not the bank. Is that why a lot of people say
well,
that it's fraud?
Chris, if I said to you, "Here's an apple seed, can you give me some apples this year from that seed?" You'd say you're having a laugh. Next year you might get 1 apple off of it. The following year you might get 5 or 6 apples, and the third year you might get 30, 40 apples. But it's a futures thing. And when you take on a mortgage, when you say, look, I've seen a property that I want to buy, it's 300,000. We've got 10% to put down. We need 270, for which the bank is going to say, okay, well, the projections are it's going to cost you 2.5, 3 times that over 25 years. Yeah, then people say, well, that's making money out of fresh air. Well, when you sign the loan or mortgage agreement, it's a promissory note. If you get a 5, 10, £20 note, near the monarch's head, it says, I promise to pay. Well, when you sign a mortgage loan agreement, why do you do that? It's because you can't pull the money out of thin air that day. It's got to come somewhere. It will come from an SPV. And the SPV is bankruptcy remote. The bank, in most cases, becomes the servicer. And you'll get SPV 1, SPV 2, 3, 4, and then PICO, the exit SPV. But the thing is, if money just comes out of thin air, why don't people just pluck it out of thin air?
Mm.
You know, if they understand it that much, so you sign a promissory note, a debt agreement, a mortgage, whatever it is, and you enter into that. The bulk of the ones that I deal with are where people are told, we'll help you expand your business, but we've got to put a charge on your property. And, here's 100,000, here's 200,000. And you're in a house that's maybe worth 600,000, whatever it is. But the bank doesn't fully come through with the money. And because you've put in projections, you put your accounts in, they know that if you're borrowing 200,000, they know that when you reach 120,000, that is a pivotal point. And then you need the money for the marketing, the this, the that. And if you can't do that bit, it's like designing a race car. Let's say the world is running on Ford Fiestas. And yeah, you could get some pretty fast ones. But let's say this guy then invents something called a Ferrari Plus or something. And even the fastest Fiesta that all the rest of the market is running on can't outrun this Ferrari Plus. So the guy has the money and he builds and develops this, takes it to track day, and then the bank says, well, we're not giving you any more money, so you can't put fuel in. There's not going to be a change of tyres. We're not going to fund for your mechanics and your crew. Um, so you're left sitting there with this potentially a magnificent thing, but it can't go anywhere. Even a horse and cart would overtake it because the bank have misled you, they've baited you, they've deceived you, and that's the whole thing about fraud. With fraud, it's basically party A, the bank deceives party B, party A's gain, party B's loss for the intended permanent loss of property, which is bricks, mortar, money, intellectual chattels.
Mm-hmm.
You then need to bring in the mens rea, which is guilty mind. You need to show that they intended to deceive you, and you need to bring in the actus rea. So, and then what you need to bring in is the Ivy test, which none of Avon Somerset Police knew what the Ivy test was. And that's the test for deceit. It overtook Ghosh from 1981. So if police don't understand what fraud is, how can they? Well, I suppose that's how they say we can't see it.
Mm-hmm. It's funny you should say that because I attended just down the road from me, some bloke was having or they tried to clamp his cars and his work van, and you can't clamp a work van because it's their way of making money
Mm.
over not paying, or there's a dispute, should I say, regarding council tax. Now the male policeman was like, "Oh yeah, all the paperwork's there, blah 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 blah," and my good friend Bob Say said, "Are you legally trained? What? Are you legally trained? No. Then how can you say that the paperwork that you're seeing is all above board if you're not legally trained?"
There was Bob legally trained.
Bob is very savvy on it. He's got
Is Bob legally trained?
I don't know if he's.
Well, there you go then. He
Oh,
might be, he might not. I mean, my understanding. I mean, you get legalese, um, and then you've got law. I mean, I don't do straw man. Um, I don't do straw man, but I use a little bit of their legalese, and that's how I got my case from the Central London County Court back up using their legalese.
hmm.
It's in the judge's tool bag, so I said, "There it is. Use it." Um, I use common law, so I use ancient law, and I use modern statute. I use some of the international law. Crime against humanity. I mean, that's the third silo. So you get silo one, the fraud, the bribery, bomb. Silo two, misconduct in public office of whatever level, and silo three. When you take one and two, people suffer.
Mm.
So then you bring in Section 134, the Criminal Justice Act 1988. And the judge said to me, he said, "What does that mean?" I said, "Well, basically, Your Honour, to keep it simplistic, if you get a person in public office, if they don't do as they should do, or they do something they shouldn't do that then causes harm, torture, and we're talking about psychological torture, um, then, it's a penal sentence." And Priti Patel had done what she should have, but when we gave her the 96 case files, there were some that had already been proven as fraud. Um, with policing, the Home Secretary sits top. So in 2011, um, they brought in a new structure to introduce crime commissioners. So they brought in the Police Reform Social Responsibility Act 2011. And off of that, you've got statutory instruments 20112744. And that allows, that secondary legislation, that allows, if there's a breakdown of the police chief and the crime commissioner and they're not doing what they should, or their officers are not, then the Home Secretary can step in through statutory instruments 20112744 because it's a backstop. And that jumps them back to before crime commissioners, and it allows them to jump back in under the Police Act 1996, Section 40A and 40B, in protection of public interest, national security. So we're just saying, look, please use the law. But then you go to MPs, and because you're stuck in Quango court, you know, you're being dragged in by criminals into their civil courts, and it's not right.
Mhm.
And that's why there's so many people stopping these evictions and that sort of thing. And that's why I go along. I go along as an auditor to see what's happening and say to the police, "Are you on your oath?" Um, and often they're not. A police officer is there to stop a breach of the peace. And if you've got the bailiffs and they're thugs forcing entry into a non-commercial, I think even the property, if it's residential, it can have up to 40% commercial use. Um, Anything above that, then the bailiffs and that can go in. But on a normal residential eviction, um, they can't. And the police are not being trained to do it. It may not be that the police are intentionally doing it. Maybe they are. I mean, you can hire police, can't you? Here's
Well,
some
yeah, this is
silver.
it. You can hire police.
But and this is the trouble. It's are a lot of people. I went through a stage of thinking bloody bankers, are they all corrupt? And I went in some of the Lloyds and some of the others, and I'd say to the counter staff, how's money made? And a lot of them didn't know. And I think if you look at the war, when they used to design a new Spitfire or something, then perhaps it'd be built in 7 or 8 factories. So they build the wings in that one, they build the cockpit in that one, and they build the new engine in that one. And that was so that if anything leaked out, it
It's
would
all
just be part of.
compartmentalized.
Yeah. And I
Mm.
think with a lot of the bank staff, some of them might be genuine, innocent, good people, and they go on their anti-money laundering course 1 and course 2 and course 3. But obviously, if you read a highway code and it tells you to drive on the wrong side of the road and go around the roundabout the wrong way, people are going to get hurt.
Mm.
But is it that person's fault if they've been taught wrongly?
Well, this is it. So that everyone's been indoctrinated to a certain level to help the system maintain where it needs to be. So professors who teach science or whatever it is, usually you can follow the money as to what science is being taught. But those people who are brought up in that system believe what they're being taught is correct. Therefore, that's what they go on to enforce or
Yeah, and
so.
if they believe it's correct, then can you blame them? If if you get Beth, and Beth is trying to get promotion in the bank, she's done level one money laundering. Um, if they say to her, "Look, Beth, you've been trying to get promotion, you've not succeeded the last 2 years, but we've got £3 billion in a fund just come in that's going to be for first time buyers. We'd like you to run a team of 10 sales people, but we need to get you on level 2 and 3." Now, if Beth does that, she might genuinely do it.
Mm.
If you then get another manager and they say, "Look, we've got a 5 billion fund for farmers. We're going to send you on training. We're going to give you a nicer car. We're going to give you £10,000 a year more and a bit of commission." If they teach that person, but to do it wrongly, they might genuinely think, "I'm doing the right thing."
Mm.
Now, if they do that wrong and they fill in the computer form, if those figures are going to default somebody and then they're going to be out of pocket and so on, it's deception. So you could have a person involved who's genuine, which makes it all believable.
Mm.
Or actually, it's just part. The trouble is, it's not a brand. It's not a black horse that cons people. That's a logo. The trouble is, it's the mens rea. It's the minds of those on the board. And when you look at something like Lloyds Bank, you have got people like Lord Lupton. Lord Lupton was the treasurer to David Cameron. Lord Lupton had Greenhill and Co, a private bank, and a lot of the Lloyds BSU in Bristol. As a Lloyds commercial victim, you would end up at Bristol, or you'd end up, if you're a big customer, you'd end up at Lloyds headquarters. And then on the board, people like Lord Lupton, James Lupton on Lloyds Corporate Markets, they would then take a lot of these victims' portfolios that have been defaulted, refinance them. The people then fighting in court, that would tie them up the next few years. And a few of them might even kill themselves or give up. And in the meantime, we refinance it, put some money back in the bank, and then what we do, we sell it on to Cerberus, Vulture Fund. And that's what they've been doing. But Lord Lupton was the treasurer to Cameron. Theresa May removed 20,000 police officers. So if you take all these big components, Lord Blackwell was the prior Lloyd's chairman. Lord Blackwell was the strategic advisor to John Major.
Mm.
You've got Antonio Horta-Osorio. He was a past CEO of Lloyd's, and he got caught having an affair, and he got photos, and it got put out there. What was that, a warning shot? The woman he was having an affair with was Dr. Wendy Peart. If you're into common purpose, then Dr. Wendy Peart and Julia Middleton used to be connected with Blair and Brown. The current chair of Lloyds Bank, Robin Budenberg, he's the chair of Crown Estates.
It's just a mesh, isn't it? It's just
Yeah, so when you go up to
web
the
of...
top of the biggest bank's board and you look at some of their connections, I'm not a conspiracy theorist on it or anything, but it's just there. You can look it up. I mean, but there we go.
Well, this is what people also get confused about, and I'm glad you mentioned that, because there's a big difference between a conspiracy and a conspiracy theory.
Yep.
Conspiracies, people conspire all the time. So, it's obvious that there's conspiracies. And when, like you just say, the information's there, you can see it, it's tangible. So all these people who shout down, "Oh, such a conspiracy theorist," I just wish they'd educate themselves on the difference between a conspiracy and a conspiracy theory. Now, you've mentioned Lloyd's quite a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Is that because they are, out of all the banks,
Brooks.
they are the worst?
No, you've got Lloyd's, you've got RBS. They reckon with SMEs, they reckon there's about 10,000 victims. This was from the APPG Fair Banking.
Mm-hmm.
But even the APPG Fair Banking, which is a mixture of the politicians, the MPs, well, on not too long ago, the APPG Fair Banking, the co-chair was Simon Fell. And Simon Fell's wife is an ex-Lloyds Bank exec of 17 years. So they're going to do a lot for the victims, aren't they?
Mm.
The BBRS that was set up, Business Banking Resolution Scheme. Well, it was set up because we were supposed to be too big, a lot of the customers, to go to FOSS. So BBRS was set up. And then in a few months, it was populated by ex-bank seniors. Where are you going to get redress there? We want some redress against the Nazi Party. We don't like that they nicked our homes and concentration camps. It wasn't a very pleasant journey. And then where do they send you? They send you to the very muppets that have done it.
Mm.
You know, but that's the trouble. I mean, it's like now. People will write to their MPs, and the MPs, some are good, and I think there's a few bits happening. It's like, but I think everything is on a line. And I think at the moment, the banking fraud that we're dealing with are probably 100 times bigger than the postmasters. And it's more complex than the postmasters. The postmasters, um, this flashing shoebox, the Horizon system, with more lights on it than my kids' computers.
Mm.
you know, what happened? Was it there was a glitch on the system? Was it that people were going and tampering with the figures? Was it that somebody went in and dropped a bug into it? But the thing is, the postmasters were dealing with one lot of law firms that were coming at them, and then Paula Venables and so on. But why is Paula Venables not banged up? It's because they've had um, like a review type thing. You know, we want people banged up. What the victims need to see at the post office, they need to see people like Paula Venables stripped out of her country mansion
Mm.
and banged up and go through hell. We don't want to see her crocodile tears. I know some of the postmaster people. I know some of their back end strategy team, and they've gone through hell. When you get beyond the way that they got there, which is one of the three ways, the banking fraud ones are a lot more complex because you're now not dealing with the same set of Muppets. You're now dealing with different judges around the UK. And like I say, I'm sure there's the odd one that's good, but you're dealing with different police forces.
Mm.
You're dealing with different bank managers. So then you've got to look into the systemic side. Um, and it's massive. But you, at the end of the day, you've got to say it's state failure because the police are not doing what they should, the MPs are not doing what they should, the regulators are not doing what they should, the judiciary is not doing what it should. They're all state operatives
Mm.
who swear oath to the crown. And
Do you think there's a small case of, and I might me just be talking rubbish, but I've heard a lot about private members association clubs, and like for example, the most obvious one would be the Freemasons, um, where they're kind of out of jurisdiction because it's a private member club. The same as like a boxer. If a boxer was to kill somebody in a fight, that boxer wouldn't be put in prison because it's part of this private association where you understand that by boxing you've got the possible outcome of this happening, and so they're protected by that association. Is there
no, because
anything like that?
what you'd have to do with the boxer, say fictitiously the boxer had been off, he likes fighting, and he thinks, oh, I want to look at the martial arts. And he goes to Japan and he finds this new way that with two fingers he can cause a heart attack or
Mm.
something. So let's say, okay, he's got gloves on, but let's say he can use what he's now learnt to cause extra damage against the rules. So just because he's in that arena, it's his mental thought.
Right, okay. Yeah, I know. Yeah,
So it
it's
may not just be negligence if he's intently weaponized himself to do damage beyond what would normally happen. Was
okay.
the other guy getting in the ring to do boxing, or was he getting in the ring to do boxing, but also knowing this guy might do some other move?
Well, isn't that a bit like MMA or whatever they call it that Joe Rogan's into, where it's pretty much you can do anything. You can do flying
Yeah,
kicks and
but the difference is you'd be walking into a do anything ring. If you're walking into a ring with a set of rules and somebody is mentally, that's the mens rea. You know, did somebody intentionally know what they were doing to deceive the other person?
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, I can see that. Hmm.
I mean, if you found that this boxer
I mean,
who then
if it was
trains,
just boxing, just by literally just a boxer punches a, keeping it simple, a boxer punches another um,
if it's genuine,
boxer and just knocks the bloke out, and the
yeah,
bloke dies because of a brain injury, just because he was punched in the head however many times, then the boxer who did the punching would.
yeah. But in fairness, Chris, if you walk in a boxing ring and you get hit by the other guy and you do 8, 9 rounds with Tyson or something, you could say, yeah, that's ABH. Look at all my bruises. You could say it's GBH. So yes, they've got exclusions, but they know what they're walking into. If you're in a situation where then the other component, the other person introduces bits that are not as they should be, then
Right,
it changes the dynamics. If um, if you do normal lending and you F it up, then that's your fault.
yeah,
But if you do normal lending and then the person who's done it has built some triggers in there that's going to default you, that's not what you entered into.
no, yeah,
In
I get
which
that.
case, the other guy has deceived you, or the other
They've caused,
lady, or whoever it
yeah,
is,
they've caused harm.
and they've caused harm. Yeah, yeah.
No, I get that. Yeah,
But I think one of the big things is we're sitting on probably, I don't know, 30,000 pages of evidence, you know. And no, I don't want everybody's paperwork because they come along with carrier bags and look at this. My case will solve everybody's. My case is the worst in the world. Well, I'm sorry it isn't. You know, you've lost a bit there. That family now have to
mm,
visit their kid in hospital because they've gone in a coma due to this crap. So, but if you take the cases that we're dealing in, there's certain patterns. There's about 9 modus operandi. So it might be valuation rigging. Um, it could be changing a contract and forcing people under duress and that sort of thing. So if you take, in the cases we deal with, you might have, a number of jigsaw boxes with the pictures, and people have got the paperwork in their case for 20% of their case or 80% of their case. Very few people have everything. But when you take that person and you line them up with 10 very similar other cases, you know, you might go from having 60% of your case and they've got a missing bit over there because they had that guy on it and they had that woman on it. And between there was this person they never knew, and actually that's in those 5 cases. So the thing I think that's going to happen will be we were looking 4 or 5 years ago at big databases, and the INEA database was a big database for throwing property data. So I get it. I'm not a designer, I'm not a programmer or anything like that, but I guess get what they can do. But what we want to do is throw all this data into like OCR PDF so it can read it. And then what we want to do, we've also got case paperwork of people that have been settled, but not through the court because the bank don't want it through the court because that would set precedents.
mm,
But I've got some of that paperwork that we want to throw into a big database. Then it says, okay, well, they got out on this, this, this. There's these bit of case laws. And here we got a case here. How does this relate to all the other bits? And then, probably what would have taken you 6 months on AI would take you 6 minutes. Here's a report. And I think that could really advance people. We're also hearing that AI is probably going to get rid of 50% of lawyers. So if there's less of them and there's more of us waking up and using next gen technology, then that's a good thing. And I think that's a game changer.
Yeah, it's very
The,
interesting times.
the other thing that changed it, Chris, is time. You know, you might have some rat arse of a lawyer or banker or barrister or something like that, where if they retire or move on and then they're replaced, you've then got the new guy. And is he or she going to be willing to keep carrying that baton for the last crook?
Mm.
And some of these people don't. You know, we need more done for whistleblowers. But I think in time it changes. Look at the Nazis. I mean, that sort of cleaned up eventually. And then obviously Operation Paperclip, a lot of them got let off and
Run
went
NASA
other
now.
places. Yeah, NASA or, got involved in surgery, that sort of thing. So I think things do change, but I think a lot of these frauds, they just move elsewhere. And I think it's like a lot of these foreign wars at the moment that I'm fed up of hearing of.
Mm.
Yes, I feel very sorry for the people, but what about our own people? Because we're seeing boats come over, and that some of these repossession blocks that take place, I've gone to loads of them now. And the security guards, they often can't string a word in
I was
English
going to
along.
say, I've noticed that a lot of the security guards who are protecting these places, none of them are English.
No. So where's the passport checks and all this and that? There was one the other day, and the guy said, we can't go back to our own country because they put us on a training course, probably a SEA security course, probably
Which are
inflated the
crap
cost.
because I've done one of those. Yeah.
Yeah, probably inflated the cost, and then they don't give their passports back. So these people are stuck. They then get housed in some Brit's house that might have just been stolen, and people are just getting a little bit paid
Packed
off with
off
it.
with it. Yeah.
So they're turning up in numbers and they're saying, would you like to leave or would you like us to help you leave? You know, and you can't blame people on this. But I go along as an observer because at some point it's all going to come out. I when I went to the Harlow one, because of this trash cop and his mate, I got arrested for something I'd not done. And then I got beat up in the police station. Great, fill your boots, guys. Um, from the chief constable's PA level, they've assured me that the video footage in the police station has been frozen. And I said, well, I want that evidence because I'll be coming back with an ABH claim
Mm.
because we don't want these sort of police officers near the public.
Mm. We don't really want police officers, do we? We want to go back to the good old constable. I always look at police officers as being policy enforcers, which is corporation,
Yeah.
which is nothing to do with common law. But listen, it's been brilliant talking with you.
Welcome.
I've really enjoyed it. I've learned a few things, and I hope everyone who's watching this has also learned a good few things. I will leave a link to your YouTube channel in the video description. So if anybody would like to follow Trevor and what he does, then the link's there for you to do so. Please, I do urge you to go and subscribe to his channel.
Well, we've also got, Chris, we've got projecthague.com.
Okay.
And one of the first things people should do if they've got a dispute with their bank, they should get a DSAR, a data subject access request,
Yeah.
because that's like sitting in your front room and you can see the sofa, the TV, the fireplace, etc. But what you really want to do is pull back the curtains and see all the rest that's there. Banks work in shadow banking.
Mm,
They'll show you what's on the statements, but they won't show you the other bits. So
yeah.
if you get a DSAR on projecthague.com, there's a free down template. Everything's free on there anyway, but there's a bit for DSAR. And if you click that, there's a template. And it's a very wide template. It basically says, look, I'd like everything non-redacted on this account and sort code and everything related, and I'd like it in 30 days. Now, if you've got that and you're going to fight them in court, if somebody gets their DSAR and they scan it through and create a big PDF OCR, run it through AI, run your court papers in and go, this is what they want to do. This is what I've got, you know, little Mr. AI, go and do your stuff and build me a skeleton to fence. And that's great. You know, the average lawyer that they're sending into court will be stuffed. And then you can also say to the AI, what application should I be putting in? So you're not going to just go along and it's right out your house. It's going to be, well, let's look at this application, but it's going to be on. And the other thing you need to do with the AI, you need to say, can you look at this in the eyes of a lawyer, an English lawyer, Scottish lawyer? Law's slightly different. But can you look at this and help me build the skeleton? Can you help me do the N244? And if it does that, you're going to start giving them a run for their money. And you can even say, can you go over it again now with the eyes of a barrister or a retired judge or something, you know, but give them a bit of crap back. They start losing cases. They won't get paid, you know.
That's brilliant. I'll leave a link to that as well. So what is it? Hague.com?
No, projecthague.com.
Projecthague.com. Okay, I will leave.
And that's because that's where we think a lot of these idiots should be at very high government.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Well, listen,
There we go,
thank
Chris.
you very much. That's been awesome. I really appreciate your time and your knowledge, and hopefully I'll have you back on here again in the future, and we can talk a little bit more about all this. But for now, everyone, look after yourselves. Take care. Goodbye for now.